Now I'm going to introduce our moderator for today, Mark Langill. He is the Dodgers team historian and publications editor, and he's a member of the front office since 1994, and he previously covered the ballpark for the Pasadena Star News from 1989 to 1993. The Cal State Northridge graduate has written 5 books about the team, including Game of My Life, Dodgers. He is also the co-curator for our Dodgers Brotherhood of the Game exhibition, featured currently at the museum on the other side. If you haven't had the chance to take a look at it, we encourage everybody to do so after this program. So please help me welcome our panelists with a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to be taking part in this program. Before I introduce the panelists, I'd like to just give a brief background as far as why we put together the exhibit. The exhibit is a partnership between the Dodger organization and the Japanese National American Museum, and also Mr. O'Malley's office. And we're very fortunate to be able to have everything come together and to celebrate the legacies and the achievements of Jackie Robinson and Tommy Lasorda, Hideo Nomo and Shan-Ho Park, and Fernando Valenzuela. And in this atmosphere, Dodger Stadium does not have a museum. We have oversized bobbleheads, we have all-you-can-eat pavilions, we have a whole lot of things, and the one thing that we just don't have is a museum, but it doesn't mean we don't have a history. And so both Brooklyn and Los Angeles and all around the world, we're able to celebrate our history as an organization through this exhibit, which runs through September. And so it's a great opportunity to be able to have this brotherhood of the game, not just to look at the ball club as far as wins and losses and things like that, but to look at these 5 individuals and look at the setting where this ball club is in Los Angeles, Southern California, and the effect that a franchise can have. So I encourage and hope that all of you would be able to see the exhibit. It was fun being able to put it together and just being able to have fans see different items from different eras. And again, it's not about the wins and losses, and the expertise of the museum staff was also able to bring in other backgrounds, other things of history, and so it's not just the Dodgers from A to Z, it's an overall look, and because of what you see with this museum and its community, it's really a great combination, and we're very proud of it, and we hope that you're able to see it. The panelists that we have today, I will start on my far left. Margaret Narumi was born in Tokyo, Japan, and moved to Los Angeles during kindergarten. She graduated from UCLA with a bachelor's degree in political science and pursued a master's in political science at Waseda University in Tokyo. While at Waseda, she interpreted for the U.S.-Japan Collegiate Championships, her first taste of baseball, and upon returning back to Los Angeles, joined NHK, Japan's public broadcaster. She currently covers MLB broadcasts and is producer for NHK's Cosmo Media America. Would you please welcome Margaret Narumi. Next, Tomas Benitez was born and raised in East Los Angeles. He has been an arts and cultural advocate for nearly 40 years, working mostly in community settings and nonprofit organizations. He is chairman of the board of the Latino Arts Network and is a former commissioner with the Los Angeles County Arts Commission. He is a contributing writer and founding member of the Baseball Reliquary's Latino History Project, a study of the Latino experience in America through the lens of baseball. Please welcome Tomas Benitez. Steve Hahn is a sports writer for the nationally circulated English language Korean American magazine, KoreAm Journal, and South Korean's largest sports daily newspaper, Sports Chosun. He has written cover stories on LA Dodger pitcher Hyun-Jin Ryu and Texas Rangers outfielder Shin-Soo Choo for KoreAm while working as Dodger beat writer for Sports Chosun. Steve Hahn. And finally, Eric Dearborn, current team photographer for the Dodgers-affiliated minor league baseball team, the Rancho Cucamonga Quakes. Apart from being an expert on baseball history, he is also a model and an actor who has appeared on All My Children, which is absolutely true. We saw him 10 years ago before I even knew him. I know that guy. CSI Miami and ads for The Gap, Old Navy, Tommy Hilfiger, Aero Post, that's got to be something I wouldn't wear, Abercrombie and Fitch, and many more. Please welcome Eric Dearborn. And I thought I'd start off with a general question because Jackie Robinson broke baseball's color barrier with the Montreal Royals in 1946. That's the signature image as you walk through the door to see the Dodger exhibit. And I wanted to ask the panelists, first off, when they first heard of Jackie Robinson and whether or not in their background growing up, wherever they grew up, just the fact or what they remember about Jackie Robinson the first time they heard it. Margaret, let's start with you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My father is or was a Japanese-American Nisei, and when he was raising my brother and I, he was always talking about baseball back in the States because we were still in Tokyo, and he would always say, Jackie-san, Jackie-san. And I had no clue who this Jackie-san was. I thought it was a woman. But then he started talking about baseball and said, women in baseball, wow, America is something fantastic. But it was Jackie Robinson, and he would be listening to FEN, it's just Far Eastern Network, the radio broadcast in Japan in English language. And he would follow Dodgers games on FEN. So he would tell my brother and I about Jackie-san and the Dodgers.
I grew up in LA to a white father, African-American mother. Race was never an issue in my house, so we didn't really talk about Jackie. However, near my house was the Dorsey football field, named the Jackie Robinson Stadium. And I actually recall asking my mother who Jackie was. It's the best of my recollection. She said, he's a good man, you'll learn. And I learned.
I remember seeing a movie called The Jackie Robinson Story, and it was starring Jackie Robinson, and I couldn't figure that out. You know, where was Sidney Poitier? And so I asked Grandma about it because I was at Grandma's house and I was watching on her old black and white. We grew up, I was living with Grandma at the time, and we were on Manchester and Avalon, and so race was an issue only in the sense that there was a little bit of everybody from everywhere playing together in the street playing baseball. But I had no idea who Jackie Robinson was till I saw the story. I saw the movie. That's how I became oriented.
First time I heard about Jackie Robinson was, I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to baseball, sports kind of stuff. So when I started reading all these books on baseball, that's how I learned about him. But to the general public in Korea, I think the time when it became, when Jackie Robinson's story became really relatable was when Channel Park started out in the major leagues, and when he started breaking these racial barriers as a Korean, Jackie Robinson's story became something that a lot of Koreans can also relate to. And I think that's when that story became really relevant. For me personally, reading about baseball, reading about sports was almost second nature to me ever since I was a 5-year-old. So yeah, that's pretty much how that's my story.
I should point out that there was not a prerequisite to be on this panel in terms of being a Dodger fan. So I'm not sure if they're all Dodger fans. And the reason I say that is because 3 weeks before the exhibit opened, I found out that 2 of the videographers who had done these beautiful, beautiful films about the Dodgers were secretly Giant fans. And I was, oh my goodness. Fortunately today, Evan, who is the videographer today, he's the one that's the Dodger fan, so I don't know if that's a coincidence. The other 2 are probably brooding from last night's loss. But I want to ask...
wait, Mark, what about your story about Jackie?
Oh, well, my story about Jackie, growing up, I was born in Pasadena in 1965, and so Jackie's still living, but I don't start to follow the team until 73, and he's just passed away. But having grown up and being the bookworm, and I should mention, if you ever wonder how to become a team historian, don't hit the ball in Little League, and you're well on your way. So after my 3 swings, or attempted swings, I could just go back to the dugout and resume my literary career. And so I knew all about Jackie as a kid, but I never had the chance to meet him. But fortunately, working for the club, I've been able to meet family members, and you're just blown away by the legacy when you meet so many people behind the scenes as far as what Jackie meant to them in their respective lives. And I wonder now, the Dodger exhibit, both Brooklyn and Los Angeles, and anybody want to take a crack at what the Dodger franchise you think means to the Southern California community, either to you personally or just in general? Because when I was a kid, I just took for granted that this Dodger Stadium was 8 miles away from my house, that Vince Scully just happened to be on the air telling these interesting stories, and if I spoke Spanish, it would be the same thing with Jaime Herrín. We have 2 Hall of Fame announcers right here in our backyard, and I just took all that for background as far as I was just a product of my environment. And I wonder who would like to talk about as far as what the Dodgers have either meant to them or what they believe is meant to their community.
I'll go first, I guess. To me, it's meant everything. My life actually is baseball. And I've traveled around, seen baseball, different places. I haven't lived in New York for a couple of years. And they actually still talk about the Dodgers. I mean, people talk about it all the time, but I saw it firsthand. People here in LA, I think they do take the Dodgers for granted a little. However, now that they're getting better, they're starting to come back around. And not just them getting better, the Lakers are going a little downhill. Just being honest. So I think they're going to come around even more than they are right now, definitely.
Yeah, go ahead, Tomas.
Well, you know, the history of the Dodgers in Los Angeles is really on a parallel it's on a parallel line with the ascent of the Mexican-American community. And we had a rancorous beginning with Chavez Ravine, because there was a lot of controversy about, you know, displaced communities. And actually that was the federal housing project that did all the displacing, and the Dodgers then came in and bought the property thanks to a sweetheart deal with Norris Polson. So they got some of the stink on them. But it was already, most of the kibosh was already done by other forces of nature. But there are still people in my community who are not Dodger fans because of Chavez Ravine. They write songs about it. But nonetheless, Mexican Americans grow up loving baseball. It was the game that we played when we got here. It wasn't soccer. Soccer was being played in the clubs. They were exclusive. They were being played in Uruguay and Paraguay and Argentina and all those fancy Mexicans, or those fancy Mexicans. The real Latins were playing baseball, la pelota, from, in fact, in Cuba, they had the first organized professional team before the Cincinnati Redlegs. So Mexicans were living here, Mexicans came here, they came here playing baseball. And we had a parallel universe growing up that way. When the Dodgers came to Los Angeles, they came to a city that was becoming a bigger city, a metropolis. It was becoming the real second city. Chicago's called the second city, it's not anymore. It's LA. The Mexican-American community was arriving with the ascent of the city as well as its community, and at the time the Dodgers were coming. So it was a perfect synthesis of momentum. And as a result, Mexican Americans who know they can play baseball, you can't play basketball against a 7-foot guy. You can try, but you're not going to do it. And you can't play football against a 250-pound linebacker, but you can play baseball. You can be 5 foot and 125 pounds like Zini Mora was. But if you can hit the ball, you can play ball. So it became part of the psyche, the mentalidad, the identity of our community to a great extent. as we've grown through the legacy of Los Angeles Dodgers and the ascent and the presence of the Mexican American community, it's been in tandem.
Margaret, I wanted to ask you, we take for granted, Tomas had mentioned as far as taking for granted the Dodger franchise, and lately in the last 10, 15 years with Ichiro and Kuroda, we take for granted Japanese ball players in the major leagues. And you covered the team, I remember in Nomo's early days, and I wonder if you could set the stage as far as what it was like in spring training 1995 when a guy named Nomo was going to try to make the Dodger team. Just behind the scenes, what was going on and what were your thoughts as far as what he was attempting to do?
Well, before I speak on that, I want to just say that the Dodgers are not the Dodgers without the fantastical O'Malley family. They're indeed visionaries, and in all respects, they're the ones that signed the first African-American player. They're the ones that signed the first Hispanic player. And Hideo Nomo is not exactly the first Japanese. There was a Masa Murakami that signed with the San Francisco Giants 50 years ago to this date. Murakami was not a starting pitcher. He was in the bullpen, but he was actually the first Japanese to come. Regarding Hideo Nomo, he came over in his prime, and at that time he was having a little difficulty with his old team back in Japan, and he decided, oh, forget Japanese baseball, and he came over here. And he retired from Japanese baseball as soon as he came over here. And to tell you the truth, a lot of people were skeptical that Japanese could just come over, sign a contract, and be successful. But this is Hideo Nomo. Hideo Nomo is a different mindset, and he was determined. If he fails, he's going to fail for all Japan. So he had to be successful. Sure enough, everybody knows his numbers. I'm not going to talk about his numbers, but to this day, everybody says that without Hideo Nomo's success, none of the other players would have followed. So he was a big, big presence for every Japanese player that's here, including Tanaka, who happens to be on the DL with the New York Yankees, but you've heard what he's accomplished over there up to now. When he first came over, I want to talk about not spring camp, but the first game he pitched. That was in San Francisco, the old Candlestick Park. Their public relations had 200 accredited Japanese journalists. And 200, that's a number that is close to World Series or All-Star game. Just for a regular season game, 200. And you could see about 40 different TV cameras just following his every single move. But that did not faze him. For the record, he did not have a win or a loss. The game went to extra innings. In fact, it went to 16 extra innings that game. But he did have a few strikeouts, and he showed the world what he could do.
Now I wonder what, from behind the scenes, did he feel any pressure? Because he's not just a player that's going to try to make a team. He's got the whole country looking at him and then trying to do it in another country. From your perspective, did you sense that he personally was under feeling any pressure?
Hideo, he had a poker face, but underneath that poker face, he was very, very intense. And on game days, nobody approached him, nobody. And he had this intense, his eyes were really intense. But after the game, he was just a normal guy, drinking a beer in the clubhouse.
Now, Steve, I want to ask about Park, because Park and Nomo come around the same time. Right. And Nomo's the Rookie of the Year in 1995, and Park signs, and he actually makes his Major League debut without minor league experience, and then he goes back down. What do you remember about the early days of Park and your expectations as a fan?
Well, to me, and as well as to a lot of the Koreans and Korean Americans, the Dodgers are Major League Baseball. And what I mean by that is, back in the mid-90s when Channel Park first came here, the professional baseball in Korea was still very ragtag in terms of quality of play and in terms of infrastructure. The ballpark wasn't maintained as adequately. But people turn on the TV and they see Channel Park, this 6'2" pitcher throwing 97-mile fastball against the best players in the world. I mean, that itself was a huge deal, that we had a player who's breaking these racial barriers with his ability in the major leagues. That was a huge deal for the Koreans.
Now jumping ahead, we've got Park and Nomo, and Eric, I want to ask, because Eric, you're a team photographer and you're around a lot of young players, but also you grew up in a time where Jackie was a memory. Jackie had passed away in 1972, and so you weren't living, you didn't see him in person, obviously, neither did I. Do you sense that either today's fan or today's ball player, how much do you think that they either know or understand or follow Jackie's career as far as his legacy, as far as, or maybe just ball players in general with the baseball history?
I definitely think that the movie helped out a lot. Great film. However, I did hear a story last season, and the names of the players escape me right now, but there was a African-American ball player in the minor leagues who was talking to either a former superstar or former Hall of Famer, and the former Hall of Famer asked him if he knew about Jackie. It was in the Orioles organization, and the player didn't have any idea about Jackie. And it's mind-boggling for anybody in the world not to know who Jackie was, but let alone a ball player. As far as the guys that I'm around, there aren't that many African Americans on the team, unfortunately. But one of them's father used to play in the major leagues. His name was James Baldwin. Pitched for the White Sox and a few other teams. And James is a very intelligent man. We've talked a few times, and he's thrown Jackie's name in quite a few times. I would assume that the other players definitely know also. I would hope so. I really hope so. But I think that I was at a baseball reliquary event last week or 2 weeks ago, and they talked about possibly making a museum for Jackie in Pasadena. And I would think that if they were to do something like that, because it's already been done for Muhammad Ali in Lexington and quite a few other players, if they were to do something like that, it would help out the African American community even more.
Tomas, a question for you. In the exhibit, there's a ticket stub, and it's from 1981, and there's something about that game that made you save that ticket stub. It's Fernando's first major league start, and I wonder if you could just tell the story about that day and what that day meant to you.
Well, you know, Fernando had come up to the majors in the fall, right before. The Dodgers were in the throes of a race. They were racing down the line with the Houston Astros at that time. They were brilliant ball club, brilliant pitching. They brought him up. And it was funny because Fernando was, you know, he was from Ethiopia, Mexico, and he was very shy and rotund, and he had long, dark hair. His first nicknames were either El Indio or El Gordito, you know, because he looked like an Indian. You know, he was very placid-faced and long, dark hair, and he was a chubby little fellow, so that, you know, Gordito. But come spring training, right before the Dodgers open up, Jerry Royce is out. He's scratched. He's supposed to be their starter. He's the ace. And Tommy gives the ball to Fernando, and so Fernando shows up to throw opening day in 1981. And it was very exciting because, you know, it was not quite Fernando Mania, but it was the build-up. And so going to the game was exciting. It was opening day to begin with, you know. And it was the Dodgers after coming off a great season. They tied Houston, and they lost in the playoff game. And I remember going to the ballpark with my girlfriend at the time. We were both big Dodger fans. And suddenly, it seemed like every Mexican that ever lived in LA. And there was 10,000 of them out there on the street trying to buy a ticket to get in, you know? And I said, what the hell is going on here, you know? And I mean, and they were Mexicans. They weren't like Mexicans like me, Mexican Americans. They were like Mexicanos. And we saw that game, and he pitched a brilliant game. And then that was the beginning of Fernando Mania. And I always like to say it was the first time that I can recall, because we were sitting out in left field, which is, you know, where you sit and watch the game. That was the first time that I saw Mexicans and Mexican Americans talking to each other about the same thing, which was Fernando. And it was really cool, and it just took off.
And a follow-up question for you, because he won his first 8 straight games,
right.
And this is before cable TV and all access in terms of, there was a bit of mystery, I guess, to him, because he didn't speak the English. And can you just describe 6 weeks into the season?
Well, it was really funny. You know, I mean, there was a whole mystique. You know, I mean, by 6 weeks into the season, you know, Carmen had already cut the Fernando, you know, Fernando Valenzuela, and it was being played on Discolandia and radio stations, and there was all these contraband T-shirts, because the Dodgers had no idea what the hell they had in their hands. I mean, the next week there was vatos that were out there with the handmade Fernando T-shirts and Fernando this and Fernando that, Fernando hats. The Fernando Mania was on and kicked off. But all along, Fernando wasn't speaking. He was going through Mike Brito, but even then, he was very closed-mouthed. There's a great story that Ross Porter tells about how, you know, he was frustrated because he would interview Fernando after the game, and he would ask Fernando a question, and Fernando would say, "Sí." And he'd ask him, "No." And so Porter is frustrated, and he goes to Jaime Jardín. He says, "I can't get the kid to talk." And Jaime Jardín says, "Mira, the next time he answers the question, whether it's, you know, yes or no, just ask him por qué, why, and that'll help him elucidate." And so Porter's interviewing Fernando, and Fernando sí, no, and finally Ross Porter says, "Por qué?" And Fernando says, "Pues porque sí." Because, you know, I mean, it took him a while to really, he didn't speak English, and he was also from a small town, and it just took him a while to get used to the idea that he was the center of the universe and all this was going on around him. Again, you were seeing a population surge. Again, you were seeing, you know, 80s were the decade of the Hispanic, which means they were just trying to sell us beer. But it was also the numbers. The buying power in 1981 of the Latino community was $40 billion. And they were trying to romance the audience, which they did, because now significantly the gates, you know, Mexican Americans. So this guy was really overwhelmed by it all. And thank God for Brito, and thank God for Jaime Jardín, who is, you know, to Jaime Jardín is to the Latino community what Vince Scully is to the English-speaking community. Because they kind of brought Fernando through as the mystery. But you can recall, I mean, even all the way through the World Series, you know, and that brilliant game that he pitched in the playoff. You know, the guy didn't talk to anybody. You know, he went out, he did his job, he went home.
I have to ask, Margaret, Nomo had established a Japanese community, a Japanese following, and Tomas Fernando had established a Spanish following. And so now, Steve, with Ryu, he's about to join a team that already has a Korean following, so he's not necessarily going to play the role of part in terms of trying to get people interested in baseball. What was it like for Ryu, you think, to suddenly join a team that had already this built-in fan base? This wasn't going to be new. How do you think he reacted, and what do you think the connections on each side turned out to be?
One thing with Ryu is that when you look at the previous Korean major leaguers like Channel Park, Shin-Soo Choo, Jae-Seo, and these guys, they came to the US when they were very young, and they came up through the minor leagues, and then they became stars here. But when you look at Ryu, this is a player who was developed in Korea. And back in the 90s when Channel Park first came here, early 2000s when Shin-Soo Choo first got started in the major leagues, the Korean baseball, the player development system wasn't at a competitive level for it to produce players that can contribute immediately in the major leagues. But when you look at Hyun-Jin Ryu now, here's a player who came in his first season, he won 14 games, and he's on pace to win over 15 games this season. And that, to the Korean people, it means a lot, because it shows the progress that the Korean baseball has made to now produce these players that can make immediate impact in the major leagues, and that really means a lot to the Korean community.
You've been around him, and we can see the statistics. And an effective left-handed pitcher came close to the perfect game a few weeks ago. But being around him, how would you describe him to somebody as far as what kind of guy is he?
He's very standoffish, and you can, and that's to be expected when you have all these reporters following him, all these fans. And he was already a superstar even before he threw a pitch in the major leagues. He was the best player in the Korean League, if not one of the all-time greats. So yeah, he is very standoffish.
Finally, what do you think his success will mean in terms of their minor leagues, in terms of developing either pitchers, or do you think there's another Ryu on the horizon, or is he the exception right now and there's going to be a lot of pressure on the next guy that gets a lot of money?
So far he is the exception, because there was Hyun-Jin Ryu, who was far and away the #1 pitcher in Korea, and then there was also Seung-min Yoo, who was considered a very second best player to Hyun-Jin Ryu in Korean baseball. But he came over, no one knows this, he came over earlier this year. He signed with the Baltimore Orioles, he's playing in the minor leagues right now, and he is struggling. He's struggling. And I asked this to Ryu last summer when I interviewed him, and I asked him, do you feel like now that you're having this kind of success in the major leagues, do you feel like that the Korean baseball system is now ready to produce players who can really contribute and make immediate impact in the major leagues? He said no.
Interesting. Margaret, I have to ask the state of the Japanese players right now. The Dodgers went there in '56, '66, and '93. How would you interpret their attitude now toward having all the major league ball players in Japan wanting to play in the United States? It's different from 20 years ago, when many of the ball players maybe didn't necessarily want to come to the U.S. Has that changed, or would you think there are more ball players that would like to play in the U.S. than there were 20 years ago?
I think all professional players want to play at the best level. And in Japan, the level of baseball is getting better and better, but they always look to America, to Major League Baseball, to compete. And so far, some of the pitchers have been very, very successful. We have some infielders that are very successful playing right now. And outfielder Hideki Matsui says it all. So now the players back in Japan see these guys come over, be successful, and they want to compete out here also. It's also a money thing. In Japan, the highest paid players are about $3 to $5 million. That's it. And they see the numbers that the other players here get, and they dream about that. So a lot of players want to come out here and test themselves out. For your reference, right now, there's a pitcher named Maeda, Hiroshima, that wants to come out here. There's also a pitcher named Kaneko that the American scouts are really looking at right now. You'd be amazed at how many American scouts go over to Japan, and they're scouting all these players to come over. So that's the level of Japanese baseball right now.
Now, Margaret mentioned the big money and the expectations and everything like that, and I wonder from Eric's point of view, seeing these guys when they're at the early stages of their career, how would you describe how they are? Because they're professional ball players, but yet they haven't gotten there yet, and whatever they may have signed for, they're still going to have to play. Do you sense that they look at what the major league is like, or are they in their little Rancho Cucamonga bubble and not worry that the ballpark and the riches are so close yet so far?
ESPN magazine just wrote a story that I was reading last week that says minor league ball players actually make less than minimum wage. So there's no doubt that they want to get paid. At the level that they are right now, they're extremely humble. Quite a few of them have signed big signing bonuses out of high school, out of college, and one of them's name was Corey Seager. Right now he's the top prospect in the Dodgers organization. I think he signed for roughly $2 million. Anyway, whenever someone hits a home run in Rancho Cucamonga, they pass the hat for that player. So you can throw $1 in the hat or change or whatever, and they give it to the player. And yeah, it's really sad. I mean, I should put that in a different way. No, it's sad. I can't think of a better way. But a lot of the players have actually, on the team, have actually been around for 6 or 7 years in the minors. One of the guys' name is Andrew Miller. He was the first round pick for the Dodgers, I want to say 6 years ago. Drafted out of college, left-handed pitcher. Last year he blew out his arm. He's now a hitter. He's now a left fielder. But he's sticking with it. He's trying to get to the show. And he's not making any money. It's very sad. When you look at a lot of the players in the minor leagues, you can definitely see, okay, that kid's going there somewhere. That kid's going somewhere. Yeah. But a lot of them you can't. But they have the dream.
That's single A, right?
Single A, yeah, high A.
I want to make sure that we have time for all any questions from the audience. So if anybody has a question, please raise your hand and you can ask any of the panelists, or you may just want to ask Tomas about the big pile of books that he brought. I'm sure he's hoping somebody asks that as well. So if somebody, yes.
Let me bring the mic around to you so we can catch all the questions so that everybody can hear.
The stories you're all telling are fascinating. I guess one I'd be interested in from an African American side is the decline in the number of African American players. It's talked about a lot, and your thoughts on it. Where do you think that's going? And just any insight or your personal thoughts on it would be great.
Major League Baseball started the Urban Youth Academy 7-8 years ago. And it's geared to help out minorities in different communities build up their skill in baseball and they get to the major leagues. And it's definitely helped, but in my eyes, they're losing a lot of African Americans to other sports. Basketball, football, soccer hasn't really come around, and hockey hasn't come around either. It's a good path to go, and they're doing the best they can. But unfortunately, I don't think it's going to change. And what's really odd to me is there's more money involved in baseball. There's less of a chance to be injured in baseball than there is football. However, I don't know why, but they choose those sports.
The decline of the urban center in the United States over the past 30 years has been reflected in the lack of an infrastructure that supports baseball. Baseball, you need 5 guys and a half of a court to play basketball. In football, you need a full team, and most of the money you'll see in secondary schools and in college goes to the football program. The football programs are the cash cow. They pay for the women's volleyball. And it becomes very competitive. They start recruiting kids out of middle school. You'll see kids that are recruited out of Catholic school to play those major sports. It's big business. It doesn't have the same infrastructure that it used to have. Baseball doesn't have the same infrastructure that it used to have, and so you don't see the Darryl Strawberries and the Bobby Tolans and these guys coming up from the local schools anymore. And as we continue to eviscerate the cities like Detroit that are urban and inner city, you'll see the decline. You're also seeing in counterpoint the ascension of the Latinization of baseball in large numbers. And I don't think that one is correlated to the other. I think that they happen to be at the same time as you're seeing African American participation in professional sports decline in baseball. You're seeing more and more Latinos having the opportunity to come up, as you are seeing players from Japan and Korea and other communities and cultures. Australia has a large complement of professional baseball players. But I think that it really has to do with the fact that the way baseball is nurtured in the community and then filters into, you know, opportunities at playing at the academic level or in semi-professional, professional levels. That's really where you're seeing the breakdown in the chain of bringing up talent. I also think his point's really well taken. You're seeing ball players play high school basketball that are immediately signing to professional. And you're seeing the heavy recruitment, the capricious recruitment of football playing kids that are being pulled away from the sport as well.
All right, we have a question here.
Yeah. I had a question for Mark regarding the Dodger perspective, or a thought on this. I noticed that about a year before Jackie was signed, Happy Chandler replaced Landis as baseball commissioner, and I wondered how much credit the commissioner should get for supporting, or at least not opposing, the bringing in Jackie Robinson.
I've heard Don Newcomb give his predecessor, Judge Landis, a whole lot of credit for dying in 1944, because that was really the opportunity to make a change if there was going to be a different philosophy with his successor. And so Don Newcomb says that it was not going to happen with Judge Landis, and Chandler was open-minded. The interesting thing is Chandler didn't get his term renewed by the owners in 1951. So during that term, he was able to at least make that change, and that was the biggest difference in the world. And also, I think, you know, you look at the war, because of the integration with soldiers and everything that had gone on as far as fighting for the country, there was a different attitude coming back from the war. It wasn't going to be business as usual. And so I think the combination of Landis passing away and what had gone on during the war as a country, things were going to change one way or another.
Kennesaw Mountain Landis.
Yeah, Newcomb says his passing in '44 was, that started it in terms of just the barrier was gone.
We have a question here.
Thank you, Mark, for moderating, and thanks to whomever curated this panel. It's really awesome. My question is regarding the sort of what was probably going to be, what is the next wave or influx of international presence in the game, and that's Cuba. And like I've seen with Puig, the most amazing thing, seeing him in Rancho Cucamonga last year and then joining the team, and this sort of camaraderie that built around him almost immediately with Uribe and some of the other guys. So there's that small microcosm, but then also Arua Barreña and Cespedes, Abreu. If anybody wants to talk about Cuba, that'd be my question. Thank you.
So right now, Alex Guerrero is rehabbing in Rancho Cucamonga. All the Latin ball players love him. He just has a passion that you don't see in other countries. American players kind of look at the Latin ball players kind of cross-eyed a little. I wish I was Latin. They have so much love. It's just beautiful. Earlier in the season, Juan Uribe rehabbed in Rancho. A lot of people say he's a great clubhouse guy. I'm not a big fan. However, when I saw him in that clubhouse, I became a huge Juan Uribe fan. The guy just knows what to do, knows what to say. He brought all the cultures together, because in minor league baseball, I'd assume in major league also, there's kind of like cliques, like in high school. cool kids, the weirdos, all those different people. However, in minor league baseball, it goes with the nations. Juan brought them all together. And as far as, are there any more good players that come out of Cuba? There's this one guy. God, why can't I think of his name right now? 3 years ago, he was said to be the best player in all of amateur baseball. If he would have gone in Major League Baseball draft, he would have been the first pick. However, he was in Cuba, so it didn't happen. There's definitely going to be more people that come across into America. There's going to be a lot more ball players. But we're missing out on such a good, great game that's going on over there. They're coming here, but I kind of wish I could go there to see what's going on.
There's
regarding Uribe, I go to the clubhouses before the games, and you see the players just either talking amongst themselves or just talking baseball with us. But with Uribe, he's always screaming across the clubhouse to Puig. And their lockers are really far apart. And you hear this Spanish back and forth and back and forth. And then in the middle, Matt Kemp is saying, shut up, shut up. So it's really interesting. The whole clubhouse is really a fun place. I'm sorry that you guys can't go in, but we are very lucky that we were able to go into clubhouses and experience this firsthand. But Uribe, he takes care of all the players, I've noticed. He seems to be one of the team leaders. Although he's sort of an outsider, but he's now one of the team leaders inside that clubhouse. And in Japan, more and more Cuban players are signing contracts. Reason being, the Cuban government is allowing these players to go before a fee. So.
You have to understand that when you're talking about loud, when you're referencing Cuban, it's a different level of loud. Local loud. Just underscore that point, that we are going to see more and more Cubanos. Raúl Castro is different from Fidel. Fidel, you know, is the icon and is the poster boy of the revolution. Well, Che, but Fidel. And as Cuba changes, more and more opportunity for engagement, and it's going to be at a price. You know, you saw earlier the story that came out about Puig, that he had to pay off so many people just to get here. There's still the smuggling. There's still the, you know, but more and more you're going to see more and more Cubanos coming up because there's going to be a relaxation of the sanctions, and the clubs will pay to get that ball player out here. So we'll be seeing more and more participation, and they're bringing that spirit, that love of the game. I mean, Yasiel Puig, love him or hate him, you're going to watch him. You know, because he plays full front. He's with such passion, and it inspires other ball players.
Regarding Uribe and the culture he brings into the clubhouse, most of the time when a Korean player makes it to the major leagues, it's for a lot of the Korean people, it's about that player only. It's not really about the team as a whole. But Uribe is an exception to that because he has a nickname in Korea. People call him the people's uncle, because they see him messing around with Ryu in the dugout, and like all these documentaries about Ryu, they see him messing around with Uribe, and the thing about Uribe is that it's not just that he's a clown. He also serves as like this mentor to Ryu, because when you see Ryu pitching and when he's shaken up, Uribe's the first one to walk up to him, he lets him take a breath, and he talks to him. He's like this mentor figure to Ryu, and when Korean public learns that through the news or through Ryu's interviews or whatever, that means a lot to the Korean people, that there's this foreign player who comes from this culture that really helps one of their players. So that means a lot to the Korean people.
I have to mention, my mother's 77 years old, and she's never had a favorite player before, and suddenly, since last June, Puig is her favorite player. And it's this most amazing thing to see my formerly rational mother, you know, suddenly looking at the pictures and TV and like Margaret and Bye Bye Birdie in terms of just, oh, isn't he great? And this, you know, and even last year, when he throws to the wrong cutoff, oh, isn't he handsome? And it's just amazing. So this morning, you know, when I showed her the first guy to have, since 1901, 3 triples in a game, it wasn't like she wasn't surprised. It was just like, yep, and it's like, you know, it's like early in the morning, and she's like, yeah, okay, he's great. And so he actually signed a photo for my mother. Our PR person knew what was going on and was amused by it, and so we got the picture signed. And then Puig actually came through the front offices during the World Cup, and we had this all-star campaign trying to get him going to drum up support and everything like that. And that day was interesting because the US, it was like a 1-0 game, and everybody was staring at the soccer game on the TV. And so Puig's running around trying to get attention, and nobody's looking at Puig, because when did you ever think people would be staring at US soccer and just letting, you know, Puig run around? And so while that's going on, I saw him, and I had to tell him, I said, hey, thank you for signing that photo. And I have to say, for the longest time, I guess I would have been the favorite in the family, but now you're the favorite in the family. And he had a look like, so the guy's definitely got the charisma, and just when you're going to go crazy to think, you know, what's he going to do next? You see the 3 triples and you ask the same question, what's he going to do next? He's just, you know, an amazing ball player to have on the team.
And a double.
All right, we have a question here, and then I'll go to a question on that end, and then right over here.
Steve, you brought up a question about Uribe helping out you, and I guess this is also for Margaret. One of the difficulties for foreigners, in particular those for the Asians, more so, is because, one, they're fewer, and then 2, is the language. And with a lot of, you know, Fernando didn't speak, but obviously a lot of Spanish-speaking players and stuff. Help me understand sort of the difficulty, or how do you and some of the other Korean players, and even Margaret, what you've seen, particularly beginning with Nomo, but even now there's some Japanese players, but you know, there's usually one on a team. The difficulty in the assimilation process, because I mean, baseball obviously in all sports is the mental aspect, and not having your base, not having that somebody to go to, and just help us maybe understand a little bit about that difficulty and how each of these players have battled it or taken it on.
Go ahead.
Well, Ryu is a bit of a different personality compared to some of the other previous Korean major leaguers. When you look at Channel Park, Shin-Suk Chu, and all these other Korean players who played in the major leagues, they were a lot of them just kept it to themselves. So going through the minor leagues and all that stuff was really tough for them. When I talk to them, that's all they talk about. Man, going through the minor leagues, that was the toughest part of my life. That's all they say. But when you look at Ryu, he's just like this really outgoing guy, but he doesn't speak a word of English. I know that. But I look at this guy, I don't know how he communicates with Uribe, Puig, and all these guys, but he's just messing around with them all the time. But one thing I do wonder is if his interpreter and manager, Martin Kim, he's probably a big factor in Ryu fitting in so well with the culture here. Because when I spoke to Shin-Suk Chu, he said, first 2 years in the minor leagues, I had an interpreter, but it was all me after that. It was probably the same thing with Chan Ho. But I think with Ryu, what also helps him is that he had this confidence. All those years in Korea, being a superstar there, being a superstar among Korean people, even before he threw a pitch here, he had this confidence that when he comes over here, he can compete with these guys. So I think that played a big factor.
Regarding Hideo Nomo, because he came a long time after Murakami debuted, he was sort of probably unfamiliar with a lot of American customs, and the only language he really knew was the baseball language. And I talked to a lot of Japanese players, and they say baseball language is the same anywhere. It doesn't matter whether it's English, Spanish, Japanese, Korean. It's the same universal baseball language. So in the clubhouse, I don't think there's a problem. It seems like I'm not going to use the word suffer, but they sometimes have problems in the real world, like getting a driver's license, going to the bank and trying to open an account without a social security number. These are things that they say that, oh, America wa chigau na, which means it's different in America. Shigetoshi Hasegawa, do people remember who he is? Anaheim Angels? He was one player that did not have an interpreter. He had dreams of coming over to America his entire professional life in Japan, and he was always studying English. So he came over, and even at the press conference introducing him, he rarely used the interpreter. So I really credit him that he was able to speak with everybody without that interpreter. There are lots of players out there that use interpreters, but really don't need them. I think one reason is because they're shy and they don't want to misinterpret or mispronounce English words. I think that's what it is. But most of the Japanese players understand and are able to speak more and more English.
Speaking of which, I think the fact that Ryu plays in LA is a huge factor in him adjusting to life in the US, because LA has more Korean population than some of the cities in Korea. That's a huge help. Because I do wonder, when I'm at the press conference at the games when Ryu was speaking, he has his interpreter right next to him. When he takes 3 steps away from Ryu, Ryu goes, "Hey, where are you going? Where are you going?" That's really how it is. So I think the fact that he's in LA and he has someone like Martin Kim who's there to help him all the time is really a huge factor for him.
Well, first off, I just want to thank the panel for taking the time to talk to us today. Wanted to build on a question that was mentioned earlier about the decline of African Americans in professional baseball. Eric mentioned that there's actually more money involved in baseball, but I think we can all agree that in terms of marketing in sports, no one can hold a candle to the NFL or the NBA, because you hear about all these NBA jerseys being huge sellers, not just in the United States, but all over the world. And then when you think of sports in terms of music and films, you automatically think of the themes that you hear on NFL films. So what my question is, apparently, is do you think that Major League Baseball needs to do a better job in trying to sell its brand to try and bring in more African American and other minority players so that they can be more on par with the NFL and the NBA, who seem to have done a better job in selling that siren song about making it in the big time?
Makes a lot of sense what you're saying, a whole lot. In my eyes, unfortunately, I think the basketball players, the NFL players are not showing themselves in the best light. They have the basketball wives shows. Unfortunately, the NFL players get convicted of quite a few crimes. So for Major League Baseball to sell themselves to the African American community, they seem to be paying attention to those basketball wife shows. They're not going to go that route. It's America's game. If you can't understand it, it's not for you. I mean, that's a hard way to say it, but it's just the truth. Yeah, there's more money in the things you were talking about, jersey sales and basketball and football and stuff, and even, you know, doing commercials. If I have the chance to make a whole lot more money than you're making in those other sports, but yet you can get on my same level by doing other jobs also, I'm gonna take the easier road. So I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense, but I don't know. I just don't know.
One of the things that I keep thinking about as we're seeing the decline of African American participation in baseball is that it's not just African American. It's also a broader audience. I mean, baseball has taken a hit from football and basketball because it's a different kind of game. You know, baseball requires less action for play, and as the attention span of the American audience has gotten to the point where now you have a movie that's going to have a lot of shit blowing up and it's got to be done in 120, you know, an hour and 20 minutes, you know. We've also, television, primetime television has to have some sort of sex scandal, or the best of all, which is, you know, which is a live, no, what do you call it, reality scandal. The marketing of the American appetite has also affected things. You know, and I love basketball, I love football, you know, but I just don't appreciate the games as much as I do baseball. So I think part of it has been that we're also getting the short-term appeal. The other thing is this: both basketball and football benefit greatly from the academic infrastructure. There is no minor league. There might be a semi-pro team, there might be an independent team. But in basketball and football, the training of the person toward professional sport is done and paid for by the college. And they in turn sell their selves to the networks for big money. In baseball, it's a minor league. And you've got a system where the person is going to be going through a really difficult time to get to that point. So how we're nurturing the professional athlete, I think, is also not as appealing. It's not as seductive. Because nowadays you can play one and done. You know, that kid that with UCLA, you know, came in, played a year, bam, went pro. And I think that's also part of the decline. You know, I mean, I think that we're seeing the decline reflects some of the anomalies that are part of American society, is what I think.
For Koreans, it's not so much about the fact that they have to compete with other sports. I mean, we're talking about Korean kids who are brought up to think that they have to be doctors and lawyers. I mean, but if a kid goes up to a parent and says, hey, I'm gonna graduate college and play in the minor leagues for 5 years before I throw a pitch in the major leagues, the parents are gonna think the kid's crazy. So, yeah, it's not so much that they have to, because you're not going to see a Korean player in the NBA anytime soon. You're not going to play a Korean football player coming out of Korea to play in the NFL anytime soon. But it's just the fact that becoming an athlete among Korean people, it's a different culture there. It's still very, there's a stigma towards striving to become a professional athlete.
And then in Japan, high school baseball is really fanatical. A lot of these stars from high school baseball make it over here. Masataka was one. So he was a superstar, and he joined a professional team, became a superstar. And he came over and played for his favorite team, Boston. Right now, he's with the Mets, struggling. He's on the deal. I think he's on the deal. I'm not really sure. His elbow hurts. 2 years ago, he had Tommy John surgery. So he signed with the Mets in the offseason last year, and he was in the minors for a long time. And he was with Cleveland for a while. But these superstar high school players, they want to become professional baseball players. And if you ask a young kid during high school baseball tournaments, what do you want to be? And they'll say baseball player. And then the same kids, when soccer is high in the season, oh, I want to be a soccer player. So kids being kids, I guess they'll say one thing just to look good in front of their friends. But right now in Japan, baseball and soccer, these are the two dreams of younger kids.
All right, we have a question here.
Yes, I just like to commend all of the panelists for your expertise in your field, and I just wanted to also congratulate Mark for your exhibit, and also the O'Malley family. And Mark, you had mentioned that with all this archival material that you have for this exhibit, I would agree with you that there should be a museum. And I was wondering, I'd like to request for you to speak to Stan Kasten, Mark Walter, and Magic Johnson, and the Guggenheim group. If you could just please ask them if they can, in the future, think about actually making a museum historical museum at Dodger Stadium for all the fans. Thank you.
We're very lucky to have Janet Marie Smith as our Vice President of Stadium Development, and for those of you who don't know her background, she's basically the one who put together Camden Yards in Baltimore in terms of taking an existing landmark, a warehouse, and making that the anchor to a new ballpark project. It was unheard of back then, and she was telling some people in the front office her plans, and Logan White, who's now our scouting director, had said that he was a scout with the Orioles, and he remembers this lady named Janet having this dream about a new ballpark and this warehouse, and they got back on the bus, and it just didn't make sense. They were like, why would you keep that old building? I just can't see it. And then, of course, it turned into a great project, and then she went to Fenway Park, and then she went to Turner Field, and in the last 2 years of Dodger Stadium, when does a 51-year-old ballpark ever get a $100 million facelift? And so we were just so very lucky, the third oldest ballpark in the majors, to be able to have a double-decker clubhouse built under the ground level. I mean, even some of the Dodger employees were hearing these plans, and it just didn't. We just couldn't see what she was envisioning. And now we give tours like it's the Taj Mahal and it's no big deal, and of course that's the way it is. And 2 years ago it was just unprecedented what she was thinking in terms of saving the ballpark. So we're very lucky with Janet, and Janet is also a very big proponent of a Team Hall of Fame. And so whenever she is talking about potentially having a Team Hall of Fame, I see my head sometimes nodding back and forth in meetings, and it's nice to be able to have somebody like that as an advocate, because we may not have a Hall of Fame or we may not have a museum, but we definitely have the history. So it's a good problem to have in terms of both Brooklyn, Los Angeles, and international, and then now a place to house it and to be able to properly present it.
But I think, I mean, this exhibit is no greater compelling argument as to why the Dodgers should have a museum. This exhibit, which is examining, you know, because when Jackie Robinson stepped onto the field, he didn't just change baseball, he changed America. And having the legacy of Chan Ho Park and Hideo Nomo and Fernando Valenzuela, and to some extent Sandy Koufax, and to some extent Phil Ortega and a few of the other guys that were sort of like pioneers. Glenn Burke, which, you know, won't happen while Tommy's alive, but still, you know, there's a legacy of how the Dodgers have been at the forefront, and Don Newcomb and a few other ball players. And I think that this exhibit really sort of speaks to the idea that if ever there was a ball club that's got enough history to stick into a museum, it's the Dodgers. You know, and I mean, it goes back as far as baseball, you know, with the Brooklyn Trolley Dodgers to now. So I think that would be very exciting and welcome. I look forward to buying a ticket to that museum.
I may be wrong about this, but it seems as if all the players we've been talking about from Japan, from Korea, when they come here, they are in effect free agents, and they can go to any team they want to. Maybe that's not as simple as that. And then I think about the NBA and its draft. They're drafting established professionals from Croatia, let's say, or Greece or something like that. And you'll end up with the San Antonio Spurs having a great European player. But all these baseball players we're talking about are going to go to LA, or they're going to go to New York. Somehow Ichiro ended up in Seattle. But you're not going to see somebody, it doesn't seem like, going to Pittsburgh or something like that. Now, I'm not sure that I really have a question so much as inviting comment pertaining to that.
Well, I'll mention there's a posting system. So when Ichiro was posted, the teams had a chance as far as a blind auction, as far as a bid, and so it would just be a sealed bid, and Seattle had the highest bid, and so that's how that worked in terms of the posting. Because when Nomo first was signed, he actually retired from Japanese baseball, and then Kintetsu Buffaloes one-upped him and said, "You're released." And his lawyer said, thank you very much, because that also changed as far as the contractual obligation, because nobody had thought that he would actually go to the United States. So after Nomo, there had to be a system, and it was a posting system. So when Dice K signed with the Red Sox, there was a very large posting fee just to try to sign him, and that would be paid on top of whatever you'd have to pay the ball player. So if Pittsburgh back then had the highest, Pittsburgh could have gotten Ichiro if they wanted to. And in hindsight, they would have. Nobody, with that blind bid, you just didn't know what you were bidding for.
Well, to date, the highest posting fee is $52 million, and that was paid by Texas Rangers to Yu Darvish. And because of that, a lot of owners said, well, the teams that have the most money are the only ones that are able to bid on the player. So with Tanaka of the New York Yankees, it was capped at $20 million.
I do have one question. Were you specifically talking about the Asian countries?
Well, not really, because Puig in effect is, same kind of thing. He comes, whoever's willing to pay the money.
There's a draft that takes place a month after the high school college player draft, Americans, where it's players from the Dominican Republic, Venezuela, just different countries that take part in that. Puerto Rico doesn't anymore because they actually are in the normal Major League Baseball draft. So there are players from other countries that are coming here in a different way than the posting. Mm-hmm. But Cuba, I think, just goes straight to the different teams and talks to them. But yeah, so.
I hate to do this because there's so many great questions, but we only have time for one more question, and the question will be right here.
Thank you. Are there plans, Mark, for whoever here, to have this as a traveling exhibit, what I just saw out there? Are there plans to do that?
I think there are different offers, and I think with lots of museums, one will hear about an exhibit and, hey, is this available, is that available? And so the very fact that it doesn't end until mid-September, there have already been requests in terms of different items. Different items came from different sources, so that would either be between the team, Mr. O'Malley, or the museum as far as what might go where. And so that's the beauty of having this exhibit, not just a weekend things. This has been since March, so we're very fortunate to be able to have this, and in the next few weeks we may get more offers, the more people that are able to see this, and also the videos as well. The museum has put together videos on the 5 major players, and that exposes it as well as far as people seeing it on the internet.
Yeah, and let me just set up Tomas for the books. So, so I saw the Latino History Baseball Project when it started, and I remember the big one was at Cal State LA in the library. So having worked at another college, I asked it to come to my college, and it did. And so it went around to all kinds of places, and the awareness of the Latino baseball players way back, that those books are all about, just became something everybody was talking about, and that's why I asked the question, because it's another strategy, if you will, to make this maybe a permanent exhibit. And I agree. Why isn't it in the Dodger Stadium? They have those pictures along the wall. I forget what for I'm on the Vin Scully booth, right? And you see those monuments. But this is so much better, and I just think that's a perfect place to have it. So.
Well, and I have to make a plug for Tomas's books as well, because so many times you can get the pictures and just publish, but to have the inside story, the background, and to be able to appreciate when you're walking through different areas as far as the type of history that's gone on in the back, and knowing that a guy like Bobby Castillo, playing in a semi-pro game in '77, happened to strike out a guy with the bases loaded. His name was Mike Brito. Mike Brito says, "What did you throw?" "It was a screwball." Flash ahead, Bobby Castillo's teaching Fernando the screwball. Flash ahead, Fernando's a legend, but that all has to start from somewhere. And stories like that are just evident with the project in his books.
The Baseball Reliquary started the Latino Baseball Project in 2005, and we started with absolutely no photographs or one artifact. We started with a party. We started with a bowl of nachos at at Cal State LA, and since then we've been collecting through Cal State San Bernardino, which is where the collection is permanently housed, and then we've been publishing. And so we've got Mexican-American baseball in Orange County, we've got Mexican-American baseball in Los Angeles, we've got Mexican-American baseball in the Inland Empire. My God, these people are everywhere. Mexican-American baseball in the Central Coast, and we're looking at San Diego, and of course we are in meetings with the folks at the Smithsonian. We're also in the process of collaborating with Jorge Iber in Texas, which is sort of like another version of California. It's got like, 15 different countries into one state. And we're also collaborating with our friend Carlos Rotalera, who runs the National Mexican-American Museum in Chicago. So, and it's just essentially been collecting photos and stories, because Mexicans have been playing baseball. We don't have the same legacy of African Americans in this country of having a parallel professional league. We've been playing baseball in the streets and communities for years, and we're starting to collect the stories. And so far, it's just been a wonderful momentum. We started on the rooftop at the library back in 2005, remember that? With nachos. And thanks to Richard Santillan and Valderrama and all the scholars and all the hard work, and everybody coming up. It's amazing, we break out a book like Orange County, and then we get people from, Fresno saying, hey, we play baseball too, eh? Bring your pictures, bring your people. I got a deal. Everybody knows somebody who played baseball. I had a meeting with Rosalio Munoz, who was the leader of the American Communist Party in the United States. And I'm meeting with him and a person on a project to do a grant. And we sit down, and I mentioned that they had funded us on this. And he goes, oh yeah, well, my cousin played baseball. I said, even the commies played baseball. I have a couple of copies of the first one, which was Mexican-American baseball in Los Angeles. Today, only $15. And some cards that have the online resource if you want to start looking at some of the editions. Okay, so I'll have that. And thank you for letting me do the plug.
I think that'll do it. We'll still be around, but I certainly wanted to not only thank the panelists for their expertise and their participation today, but to be able to thank Elizabeth and the museum for everything that they've done. This exhibit has just been just such a pleasure to be able to work with. And so thankful to you, Elizabeth, and the museum for this Brotherhood of the Game exhibit. Thank you very much.